Welcome to another episode of Cosmo Malayali. We as a society seem to be living longer. However, the attractiveness of a longer life hinges on its quality. The fact is we all depend on others, and it's part of human condition. We can pretend this isn't so when we are young and healthy and our work is going on well. But when you are struck with a major health issue, where do you turn to? Or is it okay to ask for help? Is that your right? Every one of us will need to care for someone or be cared by someone in our lives at some stage. From both patient and doctor's perspective, should we just focus on treating the disease and curing it? How do we manage the associated pain and suffering? Does the extended family get any form of support, especially emotional support? What we are hoping to discuss today is the topic of palliative care. The general public doesn't seem to be very much aware of this issue unless and until a calamity strikes us personally. We're doing this episode in English hoping to get a wider coverage. And I would like my co-host Nitin to introduce our esteemed guest, Dr M R Rajagopal, who is also referred to as the Father of Palliative Care in India. Nitin?
Thank you, Savita. So, welcome from me to Cosmo Malayali. It was, I think, just more than 20 years ago when I first met Rajagopal sir and his team at the Calicut Pain and Palliative Care Society clinical areas. I think I was doing my internship at the time. So at the time, I don't think I appreciated the depth and impact of what his team had started at that time. It was only when I read this book by Rajagopal sir, Walk with the Weary. It was only then I realized how exceptional his life, his career, his vocation, and accomplishments have been. Ladies and gentlemen, Savita and I are very honored to welcome Padma Shri Dr. Rajagopal to the Cosmo Malayali chat show. Sir, thank you very much for being part of this show. Now,
thank you.
Now, I have to confess here that to our viewers that it is very difficult to summarize the accomplishments of an eminent person like Sir. But at the same time, it is necessary that we appreciate the work and vocation and all the successes he's had. Rajagopal sir specialized in anesthesia. He later focused on establishing and improving the palliative care setup and pain relief availability in Kerala and other Indian states as well, by collaborating with the governments of India and Kerala on policies and law. Rajagopal sir, as Savita just mentioned, is now considered the father of palliative care medicine in India. He is the Founder-Chairman of Pallium India, which is a non-governmental charitable trust at Trivandrum. He's also the director of the Trivandrum Institute of Palliative Science, which is a WHO collaborating center. Now, he has been awarded several times by several organizations, both nationally and internationally. And notable among those recognitions were the Alison Day Forges Award by the international organization Human Rights Watch. He was named one of the 30 most influential leaders by the American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Care Medicine in 2017. In 2018, Dr. Rajagopal was honored with the Padma Shri by the Republic of India. Last year, he published his memoir, Walk with the Weary, describing his palliative care journey so far. Now, Savita and I read this book, and we both share a lot of views Sir has mentioned in it. It is written in simple, plain English, and it has, and you don't need to be a doctor or a medical professional to understand what is written in it. And it comes with some powerful thoughts and reflections as well. And I'm sure the book, how the book can help you is that, in certain situations where you or I find ourselves in, like, in difficult situations, I think the book can be of help to give you an alternative view of how to deal with these situations. So starting with the book itself, I know it has been a long introduction to sir. I want to ask you my first question. What made you write this book?
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Savita. What a privilege. But to answer your question, well, I thought I had a story to tell. I had a story that had to be told because what is happening around us in healthcare is scandalous. I'm sorry to use those strong words, but it is. It is really a travesty of justice. Tomorrow, when my time comes, unless my family is vigilant around me, and unless the palliative care team protects me, I think I'll be subjected to something that I still consider precious, intensive care, which at that point of time will be horrendous. Everything that will be most important to me will be taken away from me when I'm seriously ill. While the healthcare system should be focusing on well-being, to the last point, it focuses on tumors and microbes to the exclusion of consideration of the human being. So I thought I should tell this story not only for the medical professionals, but for everyone to stop and think about it if they dare. I say that because the majority of people do not want to think about illnesses or death. They'll say, let us cross the bridge when we come to it. But at that time, you find out that you don't know how to cross it.
Right.
Yep.
So the general public seem to be quite ignorant about palliative care. So what is palliative care and how can the public get more information and access to palliative care? Like somebody who's living in Kochi or Trivandrum, where do we turn to, for help, or who do we contact?
Savita, we feel guilty about this. We have not reached out to the person on the street anywhere near enough. We don't know how to actually. You people are doing this, and that's a tremendous thing. Thank you for doing this. We should be reaching out more to the people rather than just to professionals. But when somebody does look out for it, we actually have a directory of palliative care centers on our website with their contact informations. And we take it as our task not only to look after the patients who come to us directly in Trivandrum, but to be available for anyone, anywhere. And Savita, as the final part of my answer to your question, we do have a telehealth program covering the whole country. Of course, unfortunately, we cover only 3 languages, but anybody, anywhere in the country is free to reach out for a free consultation.
That's fine. So what is involved in palliative care? People who need, what are they looking for to get out of palliative care?
Well-being. Our official definition of health, that definition is almost as old as myself. The official definition, which has not been challenged, is that it is not only absence of disease or infirmity, but physical, social, and mental well-being. Listen, that's what we all should be doing. And the Australian, very famous doctor, Eric Castle, said, it is persons who suffer, not merely bodies. Whereas Nathan and I have been taught about the body, about the organs, about every single disease that's possible. And we are trained to focus on the disease and keep attacking it, even when it is incurable. So the public needs to understand, and more when the public understands this, professionals will be forced to learn that health care is the duty of the healthcare system. We shouldn't be focusing only on diseases.
Yeah. And pretty much asking a related question to you, sir. So, do you still feel that doctors think that their job is just to diagnose and cure, or do you think there is a big part of the society expecting the doctors to do so?
A big part of the professionals and a big part of the public have been schooled to expect only diagnosis and treatment of diseases. It's a minority of professionals and it's a minority of the public who would understand that healthcare should be more than this. That's the truth. There would be no demand unless people know that they have a right. Unless people know that they have a right, how would they demand it? So, and just because that is the way we are taught as medical students, and because that's the way we see it being practiced even now in this country compared to the UK, that's what people expect.
Yeah.
But because we are focused on the majority, we should not forget the minority, particularly the very caring professionals who are coming up in more and more, in larger numbers, to get trained in palliative care and to integrate that into their practice.
So, dying people deserve dignity, compassion, and respect. I read that in your book. So, is palliative care same as end of life care? And talking about end of life care, hospices are common in the Western culture. So, do we have that culture in India, or do we need more hospice in India?
I start by saying, Savita, that respect, dignity, and compassion is not only for the dying person.
No.
If I am coming to your hospital, even if I only have a common cold, I still deserve all that. And we don't want anyone who listens to get the idea that palliative care is only for the dying people. It's for anyone in any serious health-related suffering, along with treatment of diseases. That's the first thing. Secondly, about hospices specifically, Nitin, thank you very much for calling me the father of palliative care in India, which I am not, because that brings up how palliative care was born in the country. The person who brought it to India is Dr. Lucito D'Souza, a well-known onco-surgeon from Tata Memorial Hospital in Mumbai, who found one of his patients on the street outside the hospital and created the first hospice in the country in 1986, when I had not even heard the word palliative care. So, with respect to Dr. D'Souza, so it started as a hospice. But do you want to take a guess on how many people are likely to be in serious health-related suffering in this country? Tens of thousands?
More than
Hundreds
More
of
than that.
thousands? So it is 10 million people approximately. Okay, imagine hospices for 10 million people. And anyway, is that where? I don't want to talk to you, ask you young people where you would want to be at the end of your lives, but I have no problem seeing death in front of me. And I know if I have a choice, I want to be with my family. I want to be able to say a final word of goodbye to my wife. I may want to hang on to my children's hands if I am scared. And maybe I know I am getting greedy. I may even want a kiss on my cheek from my grandchild. Tell me one intensive care unit which will permit children to come in. So that's the way it should be. The more recent trend of home hospice should be the watchword, which means only that it should be palliative care, reaching the people, just as World Health Organization said, people where they are when they need it. But there will be some who will not have loved ones around me, around the person. And in that case, when somebody is abandoned, somebody is destitute, or even when the family is all working away from home and not available, we do need hospices. But let us talk, you just remember the concept of home hospice. It's about palliative care reaching people in their homes.
Talking about ICUs and intensive care units. So in the book you've written, there are several stories where I think every one of us can find ourselves, in that situation. And, our parents are, or not just parents, just everyone, our relatives, they might get, terminal illnesses like the age-related problems. And I think what I've come across is this constant belief of taking patients to intensive care units, despite the futility of treatment, despite knowing that there is nothing more to be done. What do you think about society's view on that viewpoint?
Listen, we need to start by thinking, whatever is their point of view, how did they get that point of view? This disease, modern disease of intensive careopathy, is only a generation old. Listen,
Yeah.
I was an intensivist. I know that intensive care is precious. When somebody is seriously ill from a reversible disease, it looks after every organ minute to minute and intervenes so that somebody can be brought back to life, and that's precious. But when you translate that to an end-of-life situation, that becomes an obscene, cruel travesty of justice, for which I cannot find any justification. Now, this, as I said, is only our own generation. Since the 1990s, till then, this did not happen. And how quickly have the public caught on? Now they ask, hey, why is he not in an ICU?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And recently, when an acquaintance of mine died and I visited the home, I heard in the drawing room a conversation. Well, it's only 8 days since he became ill. He did not have even have 2 days in an ICU. As if that was a mandatory requirement.
Yeah.
And that's cruel, because I also know as an intensivist how cruel intensive care units can be.
Yes.
Now, Nitin and Savita, in the country that you live in, I know I have data from Western European countries that when treatment is considered futile, 90% of people are taken off intensive care and instead provided palliative care. Comparable numbers in India, where we cannot afford the cost, is only 30% of people are taken away. 70% of people, once they are in ICU, and even if treatment is considered futile, die on artificial life support systems, with the dying process stretched out over weeks, and every moment being on of agony. And we don't even have the sedation protocols in most of the intensive care units, which you would have in that country.
Mm-hmm. It needs to change.
So you mentioned several real-life heartbreaking stories in your book. And one thing I picked up was that a lot of patients were not given the opportunity to express what they want to do or didn't know what their choices were. So what I'm talking about is the importance of involving the patient in decision-making. Would you be able to explain the term patient autonomy to from a layman point of view, please?
As a medical student, I myself, and one generation later, Nathan, were taught medical ethics as part of forensic medicine. We were not taught of it as anything to do with real life, really. We were also taught that the overriding principle of medical ethics is autonomy. This is my life. You may be the doctor with 7 degrees, but I have more right over this body than anybody else. That is patient autonomy. And any doctors who listen to this, please remember that I still have that right, even when I am sick, even when I am seriously ill, even when I am dying. If I have expressed my wishes, you have the duty to follow it, ethical responsibility to follow my wishes. And if I have not expressed my wishes, there would be still the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And who, if I give the proper description of what happens in an intensive care unit, would opt for that kind of ending of one's own life? But leaving that alone, this is fundamentally important. The doctor holds all the knowledge, but I still have this right. You may consider that treatment is absolutely necessary with such this, and this. And I may say, thank you, Dr. Nathan, but that's going to destroy my family financially. I don't want to go with the feeling that I have destroyed my family. That may be my decision. You have to jolly well respect my decision. You may give me more time. You may give me explanations. You may give me alternatives. You may say, go and think about it. Let us talk again day after tomorrow. But eventually, it is my decision. It should be. Today, it is not.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I am able to fight for it, it's not.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, isn't it? So, sir, you have mentioned in your book about bereaved relatives coming back to coming back to you in palliative care after a patient's death. How does palliative care support bereaved relatives after a patient's death?
We don't do enough, though it's our responsibility. Palliative care, by definition, is for the patient and the family. And many of you listening to this would know that sometimes the family member suffers even more than the patient.
Mm-hmm.
The patient's suffering ends with end of life.
Mm-hmm.
The family's suffering goes on. And the depth of the suffering is not talked about because it is not visible on the MRI screen.
Yeah,
so
very
it's
true.
not no business of healthcare.
Yeah.
But it is our concern. So we do accept that responsibility, though we accept the fact that we don't do enough. So what we have in Trivandrum is a self-support group,
Okay.
which is run by volunteers with some counseling skills. So periodically, now it's happening monthly, bereaved people who have lost a loved one are invited to it. Those who want to come, and they can talk about their experience to one another.
Mm-hmm.
They will be understood because others have gone through the same path. They get strength from one another. And medical social workers, counselors, and psychologists are available to guide them when they need guidance. Maybe that's only one part of it.
Okay.
Do you know what happens to people on the social front? How many families lose their homes after the final weeks of treatment in the best hospital where they take them?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is lost. You may find this strange, but looking after the bereaved family, patient or bereaved family may actually mean giving them food.
Mm-hmm.
About 135 families get food kits from us every month so that they don't starve. And most of them have gone to that state because of healthcare costs.
Mm-hmm.
The catastrophic health expenditure in India in 2015, as reported by 3 Indian authors in British Medical Journal, was 55 million. Out of them, 38 million Indians had gone below poverty line by catastrophic health expenditure. And then think about what happens to children of those families who have never been given any counseling, any information till they saw the dad's or mom's dead body, what happens to their psyche, and how they would drop out of schools unless we support their education. So we provide that. We have a support system, not only for bereaved children, but for children of patients also. If they cannot afford schooling, we would look after the schooling.
Yeah. It is interesting how all these things in society is interlinked, isn't it? Like how lives are affected by just, all these problems.
Nitin, there is an additional point that I want to mention, that sometimes we go by the book, you see.
Mm-hmm.
I learned all my palliative medicine from UK, my early lessons.
Yeah.
And if we do not take into consideration the realities in India or other low middle income countries, we would go by the book. And then those starving families will get only tablets, no food. Yeah. Those children would not get support for education. So we have to adapt the system to suit Indian realities.
Sir, I have come across instances where the doctor chooses to talk about a patient's terminal illness to everyone else around the patient except the patient. And this seems to be quite common in India, unlike the Western world. You mention in your book, talk to the patient and not about the patient. So is this because the doctor cannot bear to break the bad news to the patient, or is it because the society, our society in India doesn't expect doctors to do so? Or is that an issue where the medical curriculum doesn't include different aspects of palliative care, more training for doctors in palliative care, like training in breaking bad news and things like that? Or is it a matter of the public changing their attitude and beliefs?
The answers to the two parts of the question are yes and yes. Nitin and I, as medical students, were not taught anything about communication with the patient. We were not taught, leave alone communicating bad news, anything at all about the principles of communication. So doctors don't know how to communicate with the patient, and then the patient may cry and it will be clumsy, a nuisance, whereas it's easy to turn back. And if it is a woman, then aren't there any men? And because men are strong, you see. Haha, Savita must be smiling to herself. See, that's a done thing. You choose the person who is least likely to break down and convey the news to that person. And what happens in that bargain? My fundamental right over myself, my autonomy, is challenged. That's the primary problem. We have not been taught. But the second part is the family is loving, you see. They don't want to hurt me. They want to protect me by keeping the truth away from me. And this is so obvious usually because the majority of us are not trained good liars. When we tell lies, our face conveys that. If the dad asks him, "Hey, what's wrong with me? What did the doctor say?" If you are telling the truth, you would look at his eyes and talk. When you are hiding something, you will look elsewhere, and your face will tell your dad, who has known you all your life, that you are lying. It is not convincing, but it's also love, trying to protect the person with the illness. But I have been mourning about problems all through the last half an hour. Let us say something nice. From 2019, medical students who joined medical colleges, that would be about 635 medical colleges in the country, totaling about 90,000 plus medical students every year, have communication included as part of their curriculum.
Excellent.
Pain relief, end-of-life care, attitude, ethics, communication, all new entrants into curriculum. It will be another generation before it's actually taught, because who will teach this in 635 medical college? We are trying to help that process. We are working on it, but at least something to look forward to. I am determined to stay alive till those doctors qualify, so that one of them will treat me.
80% of the world does not have access to pain relief. And I know there are sometimes political obstacles to it. Sometimes there are logistical obstacles to it. But do you think that there is a culture of acceptance to suffer, or accepting to suffer pain is also to blame?
Then when people have no choice, what do? Okay, like we can say that in our culture, for example, we believe in afterlife, and some religions believe that suffering in this world will be their passport to heaven, and so on. But I am yet to see that very religious person when in agony, in pain, saying, no, I don't want pain relief. Let me go to heaven. Let me suffer. I am yet to see it in any number of tens of thousands of people I have tried. Of any religion, I have not seen that person yet. It is true that people accept pain relief so long as it is borne by somebody else. That's a very philosophical attitude to pain. What does pain matter? Kind of thing. So you allow your loved one to die, and the worst is you allow children to die. You mentioned 80% or more deprived of pain relief. And I would say if you count the number of children, it would be more than 95%. Out of love for them, you allow them to die. So I don't think it's a philosophical acceptance. It's an acceptance because they have no choice. And in our country, and most of that 80% of the world, people don't even know that pain could be relieved.
So, taking the idea of the Pallium India, the society you have formed, if people like me want to volunteer, is there a particular person we should contact, or are we given training? And obviously, not everybody would or be able to do clinical part of the volunteering job. Are there any non-clinical roles for volunteering? How can the general public help the Pallium India Society?
Thank you. Yes, indeed. Palliative care is not only to be done by professionals, it's something for everybody. And as I told you earlier, in our bereavement support programs, social support programs, volunteers take the lead. So indeed, there's a lot to do. And our website does give the link. Anybody who can volunteer, as you said, it doesn't necessarily have to do with patient care directly. There are 100 ways in which you can help, especially in these modern days. Electronically, there's a lot that can be done. And there are volunteer training programs. They again will be there on our website. Virtual volunteers training programs are held both in English and in Malayalam.
That's good.
That's great.
In your book, I can see that you highlight your persistent efforts to make changes, and nobody likes changes. And what do you think that fundamentally needs to change in our society, be it doctors, nurses, carers, patients, or families?
I think professionals will change there are certainly thousands of people who have accepted responsibility to treat suffering. But when we are talking about millions of professionals, a few thousands seem such a small number. But I truly believe that it is a public perception that will force professionals to change. See, it is very comfortable for professionals to look only at diseases. If possible, not look at the patient, but look only at the screen showing the image. There is no emotional input needed there. That's easy. If we can get away with it, that would be our natural protective reflex to concentrate on diseases. But when the person on the street recognizes that he or she is being shortchanged, they have a right to have their suffering treated, then attitudes will change. And this we have seen. Nitin and will remember those days in Calicut, where our biggest supporters were the public. They found it easy to accept this, whereas professionals found it very hard, except for a tiny minority. And when you are afraid, you also get angry and fight.
Yeah.
So change is difficult, and unfortunately, things change much too slowly in our country.
I hope it gets better in the future.
It is getting better. It is definitely getting a lot better.
From the emotional aspect you just mentioned, I'm going into a slightly more personal question about you, sir. So, for almost half a century, you've been dealing with people and families who've been in the most emotionally challenging parts of their lives. So how has that affected you? Or let me ask you this question. Have you ever cried with a patient? And how do you manage your own mental health?
Have I cried? Yes, I have. I have not been. My male ego makes me ashamed to admit it, but I have. But it's not as if I cry with every patient. It may be emotionally challenging, but it's also intensely satisfying. Yesterday, a young man wanted to speak to me alone. So we sent out his wife and sister and everybody, and even my colleagues. And I thought he wanted to tell me something. He didn't. He just hugged me and cried for about a minute. And at the end, he said sorry, wiped his eyes, and said it's okay to bring them back. I find that a huge privilege, that I facilitated that connection. The connection that gave him relief, the connection that he dares not build with his family for fear of hurting them, the connection that the family is avoiding with him for fear of hurting him. And to him, I am a safe person to cry with. Nitin, in answer to your question, can I read out the last part of my chapter 23 of my book?
Of course.
Which actually answers your question. We palliative care providers are often handed invaluable treasures. The memory of a kiss from a child whose pain we soothed, a loving message from someone who once attempted to end their life and then learned to love life and remain with us, a message of gratitude from the loved one of someone whose final journey we made easier. There is this box of treasures which I store safely within me and add to each time and with another gift of love, joy and wonder, like the hug yesterday. And on days when I find myself asking what has been the meaning of my life, it is this box I open quietly, within which lie 100 different radiant answers.
That's beautiful. In fact, that was my last question. What was the greatest privilege so far? But I didn't have to ask the question. So you've told me what the greatest privilege you had so far. And it's important how we all need to discover the meaning of our lives. And I'm sure that, at least from my perspective, I think you at least know that what the meaning of your life is. And that was good to know.
I think we have come to the end of this talk. And I have to thank you, sir, for giving us your valuable time and this opportunity to meet you. In fact, it's been such an honor to meet you. And your efforts provide clarity and hope for the future. And your book has been such an eye-opener for me personally. And this talk today has been so enlightening and motivating.
While we come to the end of this interview, I remember a quote from Sir's book, about what Mahatma Gandhi had taught him. It says, "It is acceptable to fail, but it is not acceptable not to try." Thank you, sir, for trying and succeeding by helping the millions in suffering. Thank you for spending your precious time with us. We are very honored and proud to have you in our chat show. I also want to specially thank Ms. Ashla Rani, who is an executive assistant to Rajagopal sir at Pallium India, for helping us organize and arrange this interview. But thank you very much, Rajagopal sir. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nitin and Savita. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you.
To our listeners and viewers, this episode is meant to improve public awareness. Do not be afraid to ask for help. And as Sir puts in his book, a cultured society has a responsibility to lend a hand to those who need it. Please share and spread the word with your friends and relatives. You never know who will need a helping hand or support and when. Thank you once again for supporting and encouraging Cosmo Malayali show. We value your feedback, so please write to us on cosmo.malayali@gmail.com. Thank you very much.